You are listening to Fierce Feminine Leadership, episode number 200 with possibility hacker, Shelli Varela.
Welcome to Fierce Feminine Leadership, the success podcast for women in business. Each week, we feature interviews and advice to help you step into your power and lead your way. Now here's your host, women's leadership expert, Eleanor Beaton.
Hello there, Fierce Ones. Eleanor Beaton here. Welcome back to another episode of Fierce Feminine Leadership, the success podcast for ambitious women in business. This is episode number 200. 200 episodes, Fierce Ones. Wow. And it feels like literally 20. I just, hosting this podcast has been one of the most favorite things I've ever done in business. So excited about today's episode. Speaking of favorite things to do, which is interviewing really fierce women like today's guest, possibility hacker, Shelli Varela. But before we get to Shelli's story, and I can't wait to dive into this interview with you, have you picked up your ticket for your $1 Million Message yet? So this is our 3-day women's leadership retreat that we are hosting in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, November 10th to 12th, 2017. This is an intimate retreat where we're bringing together women entrepreneurs and women who are working inside the corporate world and in government, bringing you all together to focus on really what is the core leadership skill, which is the ability to express a vision and invite other people to step into that vision. If you can't do that, it's really difficult to lead. And so, my mission is to support women to have not only a seat at the table, but also a voice. Our voices matter. And in order to have our voices heard, we need $1 Million Message. So I want you to join me and a group of incredible women from different parts of the world who are coming together to really hone in on our message, our mission, our vision, to develop that $1 Million Message and to learn how do you effectively deliver that in a keynote talk? How do you effectively deliver that around the boardroom table, in an interview, in a networking situation? How do you elevate your visibility, put yourself in line to secure those top jobs, and really establish yourself as a woman of preeminence in your space, which is, of course, so critical for expert-based entrepreneurs. So if that's you, I invite you to join us for your $1 Million Message. Find your voice, craft your strategy, change the world. It's really a life-changing 3-day retreat. It's one of our signature events. We've sold out our events every time we've offered them. Our tickets are moving, so get your spot. You can go to yourmilliondollarmessageretreat.com and certainly reach out to us with any questions that you might have. So let's talk about Shelli Varela. Just an incredible powerhouse woman. She is a possibility hacker and has really devoted her life to exploring and living from a place of what could be possible and how do we make our dreams truly real through living in that place. She's going to talk about that. She's the host of the Yes Effect podcast. Great show. I've been a guest on that show before. Fabulous podcast. She's a speaker and she's a fire captain. And so she's got a really interesting story. Can't wait to share it with you. But first, a word from our sponsors. Inspiring communication is the hallmark of the world's greatest women leaders. When you know how to elegantly and persuasively share your message in a way that people will hear and act upon, nothing can stop you. Eleanor Beaton here, and I want to warmly welcome you to a free mini course that we're going to be hosting called How to Find Your $1 Million Message. In this free mini course, you will learn the exact formula that made Sheryl Sandberg's book Lean In such a blockbuster bestseller and how you can find your $1 Million Message. I'm going to teach you how you can get booked as a paid keynote speaker even if you don't have an agent or best-selling book yet. And finally, I will share some insider secrets about how to quickly build a global brand and set yourself apart as a woman of influence through speaking. Whether you are looking to grow your business or step into your next level of leadership inside the corporate world, this training is going to give you what you need to help you elegantly and persuasively share your $1 million message with the world. To sign up to get access to this free mini course, all you need to do is go to eleanorbeaton.com/message. That's eleanorbeaton.com/message. I'll see you at the training, and I can't wait. Shelli Varela, welcome to Fierce Feminine Leadership.
Thank you so much for being here. It's absolutely a pleasure to be able to spend some time with you yet again.
I want you to take us back because, you just mentioned before we turned on the recorder, that for you, it's all about possibility. But I want to go back to a moment of opportunity. You were a struggling artist and you made the decision to make a change and to move into the world of firefighting. Take us back to that moment, and what was it that prompted that change of heart and ultimately change of work?
Well, yeah, absolutely. So it started for me, I was 20 years old. Again, I was an artist. I worked in special effects makeup and film and writing, painting, drawing, that kind of thing. And it's so interesting how we think about labels and how the world labels ourselves, or even more detrimental is how we label ourselves. And so because I had a talent and a skill and a love for art from the time I was a little girl, the world basically told me that I was an artist. And I believed that that's who I was, not just what I enjoyed or a talent I had. So as I was getting a little bit older, I'm finishing up high school, all my friends seemed to have their entire lives worked out. They knew the colleges they'd go to, the jobs they wanted. And I had no idea, because the harder I looked for my thing, the more anxious I got, because although I loved art, I was also, by nature, an anxious kid. So I was looking for something with a little more security and I just didn't want to have to worry. And every time I would explore that area, I was coming up with nothing that felt like a career. So I had a chance meeting with a family friend, and he was a Toronto firefighter. And we would, we'd trade stories. I would tell him how pathetic and directionless my life was. And he would tell me these amazing stories of, fires and rescues. And I was just like blown away that that's what you get to do. Like, that gets to be your job. But this is, again, 7 years ago now. So there was no girls at the time. And also I was 108 pounds and completely not appropriate. So I often get asked, did at any point you think, oh, I'd love to do that? I was so far behind, I thought I was first. Like, I didn't cross my mind. It was just not even on the radar as a possibility. But something interesting happened, because I would hang off his every word. His stories turned into lessons. And eventually I corrected him on something that he had taught me previously. And he just turned to me and said, Shelli, why don't you just apply? And even when he said that, I didn't take it on as my own, or that was not my light bulb moment. That was the most ridiculous statement I'd ever heard. So I remind him, I'm like, buddy, I'm not big enough, brave enough, strong enough. I'm 108 pounds. I'm an artist. There is nothing about myself or my skill set that pertains to firefighting. And there's no girls. And he said, without missing a beat, there will be a girl one day. Why wouldn't it be you? And even then, that was not the light bulb moment. But I went home that night, and I remember lying in bed looking up at a white stippled ceiling and saying 3 words that changed the rest of my life. And those words were, why not me? And something changed when I heard myself say that. It was like a switch got flipped. And it was interesting, because when he said there's going to be a girl one day, why wouldn't it be you? He believed that, and I didn't. So it was kind of, with respect to your question, that was the light bulb moment for me, when I was able to borrow somebody else's confidence until I had my own. Because I think at some point in our lives, we all need that. We all need someone to look you square in the eye and say, no, it's okay, you got this, you're good. And that was the moment for me.
So what happened from there? You're lying in your bed, you borrow
your mentor's confidence and you say, why not me? Take us through what happened next.
Yeah, I pretty much got my teeth kicked in. So I was completely naive about the process. I had no idea how competitive it was. I just thought, oh, well, this is amazing. I've had this revelation. I need to get my body physically ready to do the job. But I am completely naive to the process, to the odds of getting hired, to how competitive and all that kind of stuff. So I thought, okay, well, I literally have no skills, like not 1, 2 skills to rub together. I have nothing. But I realized even if I had every skill I needed, even if I knew how to drive a truck, first aid, CPR, all the rescue techniques and so on, none of it would matter unless I was physically able to do the job. So my starting point was calling the local university who hosted the firefighter physical. And I was about a 10-kilometer-a-day runner at the time. I was tiny, but I was pretty feisty. So I thought, okay, well, it's going to be hard, but I'm pretty sure I can get it done. That is not even kind of what happened. So I paid my money. It was a half-day test, and they put you on a treadmill until, well, you're ready to puke, essentially. And then after you get off the treadmill, then you do all the strength-related tests. So at the time, the testing was, carrying 136 pounds up 10 flights for time and dragging a 250-pound sled 50 feet for time and so on and so on. And although it's the same physical for guys as girls, as it should be, proportionately speaking, it was tougher for me in that I was so small. And so I got my butt handed to me. It did not go well. And it was crushing because that was the first time I ever felt like I knew what my thing was. And I realized walking out of that physical with my tail between my legs that I was not going to be able to do it. It was just way too much, way too over the top in terms of strength demands and in relation to, my current strength. And so I went home and I bawled my eyes out for 2 days. I was just a train wreck because I was almost like grieving the loss of a dream. That carried on for 2 days. I was in my bed, snotty Kleenexes, the whole 9 yards. But on the third day, something switched. I got pissed off. And then I had this like fire in my belly. And I called the university back and I said, yeah, I'm going to need the specs for that entire physical. I need to know heights, weights, distances for everything that needs to be pushed, pulled, dragged, all of it. And I built it in my backyard. And I would fail at that physical and bloody hands and puking and snotty nose and lots of tears. And I failed at it day after day after day for months. All the while, picking up other skills, learning how to drive a truck and learning first aid and CPR and all of these different rescue techniques. And eventually, with respect to the physical, there was one day when I was able to do the tasks, not for time, not pretty to watch, but I was able to complete it. And I knew if I could complete it, it was just a matter of doing it faster and faster and faster. And that's basically how I chipped away at it, detail by detail.
It's amazing. And also this notion of getting pissed off and how anger, we often see it as a really negative emotion, but it can be used as fuel. When you think about the Yes Effect, your podcast and the work that you do, inspiring, speaking, coaching, supporting, developing, programs, standing for possibility. What's your take on anger as a constructive emotion?
I think it's a tool in the toolbox. And I think on the scale of emotions, when you look at the very bottom of the scale of emotions, you have grief and despair. And as you move up, so if you have grief and despair on one end of the spectrum and you have joy and love on the other end of the spectrum, there are many milestones or steps in between the grief and the joy and the love. And I think anger is a step in the right direction, going from despair, defeat, self-deprecation. Anger sometimes is the fuse that will trigger the catalyst for that change that is required. Ultimately,
you completed the test in your backyard. You began chipping away at doing it faster and faster. Then what happened?
Well, I started applying, I basically said, I don't care how far I have to move. I applied like hours and hours and hours away from my home. And I just started, making that my absolute obsession. And what I learned in the process was interesting because I didn't realize I was learning it until much, much later after getting hired, because I kept getting asked about my journey. And to be quite honest, at the beginning, I was annoyed by it because I'm thinking, like, why is everybody like in my business? Like, why is everybody asking me this? Like, just leave me alone. I'm doing my thing.
Let me do my test already.
Well, this is after I got hired, but I'll go back to answer your question. But what ended up happening was I realized when people were asking me about my journey and how I accomplished this, they were actually seeing themselves in my story. So going back to what happened next, I think the thing that I focused on and the gift in all of that was it didn't come wrapped in a bow. So my backstory, to take a longer time to answer your question, was that as a kid, I was really bullied. I was, the runt in the schoolyard. We moved a couple times, and I was, for whatever reason, the deep thinking kid who always got beaten and bullied and berated. And I never fit in. I was, writing sonnets in a tree, and I was that kind of nerdy, geeky kid. But what happened was, as I got bullied, and I was painfully shy and anxious, but in order to survive that circumstance, I had to develop this incredible hyperactive imagination, because it's how I survived. It was how I coped in that situation. It was the only way I could get through it. I would picture myself anywhere else and someone else. And the gift in that was, because I had developed this ability to viscerally picture myself somewhere else, that was actually the gift that later on, when the entire world looked at this 108-pound runt who was an artist who had no business pursuing firefighting, that's when I could see it, smell it, taste it. I knew what it was going to feel like when I got that phone call. And when all of those people were not understanding what I was doing and certainly not believing I could do it, and they'd never seen an example of that, and nor had I, that's the thing that allowed me to continue in the face of despair, and in the face of staggering odds, in the face of, I have no business logically doing this. So what came next after the physical was really, really dialing in my mindset and really being intentional, because the thing that I kept getting asked about after I got hired was, how did you do that? Like, that's incredible. They heard my story that I was so small and I, made this incredible transformation. But people focused on the things I did, the logical, practical, tactical things you can put your hands on. Like, you learn to do, high angle rescue and auto extrication, and you got your body physically able to be able to perform the tasks. But the part that they weren't focusing on, which is absolutely paramount and by far the most important part, was how to stay emotionally and mentally engaged so that you can continue in the face of the odds. Because if anybody said, you know what, in 2 years, if you do these 30 really hard things, you'll have this amazing goal at the end that you want. If you knew it was going to take you 2 years, and if you knew that all you had to do was get through those things, then there is, it's really just plug and play at that point. But when you don't know what the end goal is, and you have to create the possibility, and you have to manufacture the opportunities, and you have to persist and pursue in the face of devastating odds and staggering competition, that really kind of is the key in the lock. And what I sort of reversed engineered afterwards was, what did I actually do to make these changes? And that became the process for my online course, Yes University. And the first step is alignment, because most people will pursue something that they think they should, or we talked about labels, how the world says, this is who you are. And I think the sooner we can shed the labels as our identity and instead look at those things that maybe we have interest in as skills at in a certain area as just attributes we have, but not who we are, I think what happens is that opens the door to possibility of, like, okay, if I'm an artist, or if I like art, I'm Shelli who likes art, as opposed to Shelli the artist, which allows me to also be Shelli who likes firefighting, or Shelli who likes to write books, or whatever we choose. And I think it really is just kind of reframing that and realizing that we really can do whatever we put our mind to, as long as we stay true to what is in alignment with us at our core.
You talked about your ability to visualize and imagine, and that this was something that you developed, growing up through some challenging circumstances. It's interesting to me because, visualization has been found to be one of the core psychological skills of high performance. So, and that visualization actually supports, and it's a core skill because it actually supports focus. So, through the challenging times of having to have the focus of going back to that training ground day after day, it was your ability to visualize what was going to happen that helped you, cultivate that discipline or those rituals. What role does visualization play for you now?
It's everything. It's the first step in any journey, is being able to not only visualize it, but to feel it viscerally. I'm an energy person. I'm kind of a hippy dippy, airy fairy woo woo girl as well, which is ironic because I call it roots and wings. On one side, I'm practical, tactical, logical. Okay, you have 3 seconds to make a life or death decision. But because I was that artist, I really am a creative and a visionary and a free thinker and that kind of thing as well. So that has served me well. But with respect to visualizing, I believe that the universe conspires to give us and to serve us with what we know to be true. And the more you visualize, and, more specifically, the more you can feel how that's going to feel before it actually happens, the more that is drawn to you. It actually changes your vibration and the energy that you put out in the world. And those with super logical minds, I'm sure, will argue this, to the nth degree. But the truth is, there are no coincidences. But when you align yourself and you just, focus on your target and say, no, I'm going there, then all of a sudden these coincidences show up, or serendipity, or, you start speaking that truth out loud, or your intention, you start speaking it out loud. And then all of a sudden somebody will say, oh, you want to do X, Y, and Z? Hey, you should meet my friend so-and-so who does such and such. He's the CEO at, or whatever the case may be. But the universe really does conspire to help you achieve your dreams and your goals and your purpose if you allow it to do so. And the more clearly you can visualize, taste, smells, the more solid the connection, I believe.
It's so interesting. I keep these, they're not really like vision boards. They're mental vision boards because I'll make goals and lists and I'll write them down. But I can see it all, and then I'll write them down and I'll look at them from time to time, and then I'll invariably forget about them. And then, months or years pass, and then I look back and I see it's all happened. Mm-hmm. It's all happened. And in the cases where the things that I really want don't happen, it's often because they shouldn't. And I think that's what you're getting at when you speak about alignment. And I love the kind of airy-fairy, hippy-dippy energy thing. But I think, and we've definitely got a lot of planners, thinkers listening to the show. So you all are really going to benefit from this. So I want to borrow your roots for a moment. What does it actually mean to be aligned? Because so often when we hear about, you've got to get in alignment, and it's this sort of high concept, hard to put your finger on thing. What does it mean to you to be in alignment, and how do you know when you're in alignment?
That's an amazing question. I actually, I had this conversation with a client today, and he was talking about his purpose, and he was feeling kind of just really not a lot of ease, he was frustrated because he kept talking about his impact and his alignment. And I said, you're using a bunch of entrepreneurial buzzwords. I said, underneath all of that. So, he talked about abundance, and I said, just stop, because yes, all of those things are relevant, and yes, those things will serve you. But to answer your question, alignment is all about what's true for you, not what should be true. And that's underneath all the ants, the automatic negative thoughts, and the labels that the world gives you, and all the things you should be doing. But it's also getting really, really quiet and going to those painful, uncomfortable places that nobody likes to go because they're raw and they're vulnerable, but that's also where truth lives. So for this individual we were talking about, he's an online entrepreneur, and he's, again, using buzzwords. I want to be free to travel and digital nomad. And that's amazing. Like all of those things can happen. But I said, what is your truth underneath that? And I think our alignment and our truth originate from our story. So, I'm not telling tales out of school, but for his specific example, he was the son of Vietnamese immigrants, and he learned that his parents came here so that he could have a better future. They came here with no money, no hope, nothing guaranteed, stepping into the unknown, all just because they wanted a better chance for their kids. And what was true for him underneath all of that, entrepreneurial mumbo jumbo, was that he wanted to matter, and he wanted to leave an impact, and he wanted to do his parents proud, and he wanted to be an example of what his parents were for other people. And once I think you get to the bottom of how you want to feel, because I believe, people search so hard to find their passion or their purpose. And that can be confronting for some people, especially if you're not clear on what that is. Because people will say to me, oh, Shelli, that's easy for you to say. You knew what your passion was. You were crystal clear. And I said, I was, but before that, I wasn't. So it kind of unfolds like this. It's like your passion and your purpose are at the end. And yes, that's always what we're, seeking to see what that looks like, smells like, sound like. But if you don't know what that is, that's okay, because in front of that is curiosity. So if you just give yourself permission to explore what you're curious about without agendas, without like getting into your head and thinking about like, well, I wonder what the end result is going to be. And it's, people will say, I want freedom, or I want this and that, and they will decide in their head what that has to look like. But instead, if you just give yourself carte blanche permission to just explore what lights you up for no purpose, for no reason, for no agenda, you'll start to unravel what actually has meaning to you. Like maybe you want to learn how to paint, and maybe there's a gift in that 3 or 4 steps down the road. So at the end, there's passion and purpose. In front of that is curiosity. And if you're still struggling with what you're curious about, in front of that comes the question, how do you want to feel? Because once you establish how you want to feel, underneath how you should feel and what the world sees you as, it will start to reveal to you the direction or path of things that are actually important to you, what I call your value currency. People can say, oh, I'd love to have $1 million. Everybody's talking about this elusive $1 million. People don't really want $1 million. It doesn't itself have value, but what it holds, or the value that it holds, is what you would do with that. And that starts to reveal your value currency. Somebody's, value currency might be affluence. Maybe they want to feel like people respect them or look up to them or admire them. And other people, it might be impact or service. And other people, it might just be freedom. But if you get to the root from your passion, before that comes your curiosity. From your curiosity, how do you want to feel? And inevitably, that will show you where your alignment lies. Because oftentimes, what we should be pursuing is completely counter to what the world tells us we should be pursuing. But at the same time, that's where the diamonds are.
You talk about the notion of allowing things to happen and allowing things to materialize. And it's interesting because, of course, when you think about, that shift from artist to firefighter, there was a huge amount of grit involved. So how do you balance allowing with the reality of grit and resilience?
Absolutely. I think a lot of people will apply grit and resilience and the tactical, practical roots side of the brain too soon. And by what I mean with that is a lot of people lead with logic. Instead, I believe that we need to lead with possibility. And so when we lead with possibility, that yes starts with alignment. After alignment comes courage and, overcoming the fears or whatever it is that keeps us stuck and holds us back. So by the time we get to the grit and the nitty gritty and the practical, tactical stuff, we're applying that grit to something that is true for us. I think where we get into trouble is when we try and force something. We're sticking a square peg into a round hole because we're like, no, my parents were doctors and I'm supposed to be a doctor, and they're studying their butts off and maybe even doing really well, but they're dying a slow death inside their soul. Maybe what that person wanted to be was an artist, or vice versa. Maybe an artist, just never believed that they could get to med school. But whatever is true for you, if you apply your grit and your practical, tactical mindset to that thing, look out, world. Because
we've got a 105-pound firefighter coming at you. Right?
Exactly. Well, not 105 pounds anymore. That was my starting weight. I bulked up to a burly 125 when I got
Hold
hired.
The phone. That's right.
I know, right? But I have kind of a creative brain. So when I looked at this massive amount of skills, knowledge, and experience that I had to acquire, it was completely overwhelming. But by the time I got to the point where I needed that stuff, I knew that that was my thing. Like I felt it in my belly. It was the thing I was excited about when I woke up. It was the thing I was thinking about before I went to bed. And so every time I would hoist that rope or have to, work a crappy job to make money so that I could learn to cut apart a car or any of those things that were, challenging or not fun. And really when all my friends at the time were discovering beer and boys, it would have been much more fun to hang out with them. But I knew what I knew, like I knew it. And when I applied those practical, tactical skill sets, basically I took all of the skills that I needed to acquire and I put them on a big board. And it was kind of like looking at a file that's been unzipped. And it was just like, whoa, that is a lot of stuff. Like, and I think that's where people and just say, forget it, like just forget it, throw in the towel, walk away. This is not my jam. But if instead you zip those files down into large pillars of skills, knowledge, or experience, and look at the zipped files only, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So now instead of 150 things, you have 26 things. And each of those 26 things is a large pillar of skills, knowledge, or experience. If you look at each one of those individually and reverse engineer it and keep backing up the bus, you will find your starting point. And it will look like a task or a habit. It won't look like something big and scary and audacious. It'll look like a task or a habit. And if it still feels like nerves in your belly, all it means is you haven't backed up far enough. So basically you take this unzipped file, you zip it down into pillars, and with each pillar, just find your starting point. And that will inform what your day is going to look like, what your week's going to look like, what your activities are going to look like. And step by step and inch by inch, all of a sudden you'll realize you're covering a massive amount of grounds towards that goal.
I love the idea of not leading with the grit, the resilience, the practical, tactical, but actually leading from that place of possibility. And, I think what it ultimately does is when you do start implementing the grit, the resilience, the discipline of execution, you're doing it with a full open sail. You're not, it's like,
yes.
Makes it way easier.
Well, I think you'll find a certain amount of ease in that as well, because whether you apply that grit, to something that you made a logical decision, I want to pursue this particular adventure. It's not that you can't have success in that particular adventure, but you get to the end of the race and you realize, I just ran the wrong race.
So discouraging.
Well, it can be. And that's why, I'm adamant about starting as you intend to continue and just kind of letting your freak flag fly and really just like, what is important to me? Forget what it's supposed to look like or what it should look like. I am honestly the world's most unlikely firefighter. Truth be told, according to everybody else, I have no business doing this job. But I'm starting my 25th year next month, and I love it now as much as I did the day I walked in. It's my jam. I love it. It lights me up. I get to work with my heroes every single day. Like, how many people get to say that?
What's next for you? What are you working on next?
I'm developing or have developed a framework that I'm calling Yes University, and partly because I think the word yes is so underutilized in our language, but also because, as a throwback to my hippy-dippy, mindset, I think the universe conspires to help us achieve our yes. So Yes University turns into Yes Universe, which turns into Yes You. Yes, you can. Yes, you are. Yes, you will. So that looks like an online course as well as a membership program that's kind of like a gym membership for your soul. So I'm collecting some of the most amazing minds and really just helping to unravel their journey. I believe that struggle is the connective tissue between human beings. So I'll have a masterclass with amazing achievers. But where I'll get them to start telling their story is, tell me about the time when you were on your knees with your face in the dirt. Because we can look at these amazing achievers and we are wired to look at them, even if we want what they have, and say, I'm not like them. That's for them. That's not for me. But when you hear that person tell their story from the time when they were struggling, then the exact opposite is true. Then you look at that person and say, I'm exactly like you. And if you can do that, then I can do that too. And so I want to be a living example for people. I want to give them the tools and the skills. I want to teach them about alignment, courage, expertise, and community. And that's kind of what we're building at Yes University. Because somewhere out there, there's the person that's going to discover the cure for cancer. And that person is probably in high school right now. And that person is probably thinking, oh my gosh, there's no way I could go to med school. Like, I can't fathom that. Maybe that person comes from poverty. Maybe that person doesn't know how they'd pay for it, or whatever the case may be. But somewhere out there are people with the skills that we need them to excel at. You know, we all win together. Somewhere out there, there's the next Picasso who maybe his teacher told him he didn't have any skills or talent in painting. We need those people to step into their potential and step into their possibility, because when they do, we win. And so that's the purpose of, you know, my next step and my next mission, because my purpose is to help people live their purpose.
Where can our listeners go to learn more about you and the work you're doing, Shelli?
They can find me on anywhere on social media at Shelli Varela. So that's SHELLI, V is Victor, ARELA. And so that's ShelliVarela.com. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter as Shelli Varela. And you can find information about Yes University at any of those places.
Thank you so much for joining us.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Fierce Feminine Leadership. Be sure to head over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. While you're there, leave us a fierce review. When you leave a review, your name is automatically entered into a monthly draw. Each month, we'll draw one reviewer to automatically receive a private coaching session with women's leadership expert Eleanor Beaton. So remember, head over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. Then leave us a review for your chance to win a private coaching session with Eleanor Beaton. Go to EleanorBeatonPodcast.com and sign up to get your free cheat sheet, the 5 critical leadership skills of 7-figure businesswomen. This free download will help you diagnose the exact skills you need to see major growth in your business and career. Head over to EleanorBeatonPodcast.com and get your free download today.